I've always been a fan of Michel Jonas. His music and his songs have basically followed me throughout my life. I've been listening to his music for a very, very long time. I came up with the idea of doing a documentary on his life. This is something that I had been thinking for a while. So I was able to reach out to him through a common friend. And he agreed to speak with me, to have a meeting on Zoom. When I explained to him my idea of doing a documentary on his life, he was not really motivated about that. He was not interested. It is something that didn't inspire him. But he told me that he loves travel. He's been traveling pretty much all over the world. And he loved the idea of maybe doing something that would be filmed in Western Canada. And because he loves to play drama and comedy as a comedian, he told me, you know, Laurent, if you have a good story, I would love to play a part. So that's how it started. I didn't have a story, but I was so excited to be able to do something with Michel Jonas, like a dream come true, that I started working on it with my brother Fred, and we came up with the backbone of a story, and then it evolved in what became the script for With an Open Heart. There is a saying from John Lennon that I just love, and it goes something along the lines of, life is what happens when we are busy making other plans. So it seems to me that what happens in life is often, most of the time, sometimes, what we don't expect to happen. And I also love the concept of the butterfly effect. How something insignificant can have a huge impact on the rest of our lives and can also impact other people as well. In the case of With an Open Heart, Fred, my brother Fred, who wrote the film with me, came up with the idea that maybe Michel Jonas would break his shoelaces when he's actually on the way to the airport to pick up his flight to go back to Vancouver. And from a simple thing like that, breaking his shoelaces, so he has to find a place where he can get new laces for his shoes to fly back to France, how that triggers a huge change in his life for the better, and not just for his life, for the life also of Dwayne and Rachel, who are the two other characters in the film. So because of breaking his shoelaces, he meets Dwayne, who is played by Dwayne Howard, a fantastic actor who I just loved his performance in The Revenant, the film by Inarritu, and I really wanted him in the film. So, and Dwayne plays the role of a cobbler, and this is where he works. I am here in that space right now. Because of the shoelaces breaking, that's why Michel Jonas meets Dwayne. And it happens that there is a strike at the airport of the air controllers. Because of that, he cannot catch his flight out of Vancouver to go back to Paris. So basically, Dwayne is driving him to Calgary, which is the next airport where he can catch his flight. And along the way, they meet Rachel, who is a free spirit singer, very, how can I say, she acts as a catalyst almost between the two characters. So I wanted to have a strong contrast between Michel Jonas, the Frenchman, who is not really able to live in the present. He's always thinking in the past. He's worried about the future because he's got to go back to France in a hurry to record his next album. So he's not in the present time, and he also suffers from back pain. He's got all kinds of issues like that. And Dwayne, on the other hand, is somebody who has a very strong philosophy of life, very anchored in the present, and he's a very charismatic, very strong presence with a First Nation cultural background, which is such a contrast with Michel Jonas. So not only do we have the contrast of the barrier of language, but there is also the culture difference. And also with the character of Rachel, who comes a little bit later on the road trip. They meet her in the Okanagan Valley at a winery. Rachel is from Quebec, so it's another culture, another way to speak, even though she speaks French and English. Her French is different from the French of Michel Jonas. So to put these three characters In an American classic, I always had the vision of that red 1965 Chevy Impala convertible going through the Rockies. It's a magical kind of environment, and I love to put these three characters who have nothing in common and see what happens. The film is light in tone. I wanted people to really enjoy the trip. I wanted people to leave the film with a smile on their face. I wanted people to go on an adventure. We have the three characters of Michelle, Rachel, and Dwayne. But there is one more character that is extremely important. It's the nature, the beautiful surroundings that we have in British Columbia and the Rocky Mountains and Alberta. And this is really playing the role of another character. And then we have the contrast with the city of Paris, which is such a contrast with the lush and the huge landscapes that we have here. So the tone is adventure, light, and there is comedy definitely in the film. We wanted humor, we wanted fun at the same time. I think today more than ever, people want to feel connected with each other. And with that film, I wanted to show how three people who are totally opposite in so many ways can in fact help each other and become friends and grow together through that road trip. So the film is really a story of transformation where we have three characters who each have wounds. They've been hurt. They each have pain. In the case of Michel Jonas, it's physical pain. In the case of Dwayne's character, it's actually anguish. In the case of Rachel, it's a struggle that she goes through as an artist who's trying to make it as a singer. I've always been fascinated by the First Nation culture. And living in Vancouver for a long time now, we are really immersed in that culture in British Columbia. And I thought it was fascinating to incorporate elements of what the First Nations can bring us into the movie. And in particular, their attitude towards their philosophy of life, their respect for nature, and their philosophy when it comes to healing. Michel Jonas had an issue with not being able to live in the present time, and also his pain. And through that journey, that road trip, being exposed to the adventure he goes on with Dwayne and Rachel, he's exposed to what the First Nation can bring to him in terms of healing, in terms of philosophy. He learns, he grows, he comes back to France as a different man. And not only does he get help through that process, but his best friend in Paris, who is in the hospital, gets healed as well. So the impact of that road trip goes beyond just having an impact on Michel and Dwayne and Rachel, but also the close friend of Michel in Paris. And I thought that that was an interesting concept to have the healing part of the journey impacting as well a key character who is actually in Paris, is not part of the trip, but somehow gets healed in the process as well. I think the film will appeal to a broad audience. I mean, we have the French audience because of the fact Michel Jonas is the main character, and Michel Jonas is an icon in France, so that gives us that access to that French audience right away. But the reality is 2/3 of the dialogue is in English. It is set in British Columbia and Alberta, so English speaking. And also because of, I think, the themes that are brought up in the film are universal. And so, and also the fact that there is the comedy aspect and the road trip and the nature. I really want to wow people with the scenery, like I have been so impressed. I fell in love coming from France with that part of the world. And so this to me is also something that I want to bring to people, and I think how can they not fall in love with that scenery? So that is really an important character of the film, is really the scenery, the landscape, the diversity of landscapes that we are going to go through. The big city of Vancouver, the desert kind of barren landscape of the Okanagan Valley in the interior of British Columbia, and then the Kootenays, which has not been used very much in film, but is such a phenomenal scenic area to film. The Kootenays is wonderful with all the lakes and the trees, the forest, and then the Rocky Mountains with all their majestic. And then of course the colorful dresses from the First Nation dancers and singers that we have in the film, and the celebration and the wildlife. There's a scene with a bear, for example, that is actually quite funny and actually scary at the same time. So, and more wildlife in the film. That's another aspect of the film, is the wildlife. So all of that, I think, will be of strong appeal to the French audience, but also to a broad English-speaking audience as a whole.